What's up, guys? I am Joseph Thompson, and today we are doing Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare. What's up, guys? I'm Joseph Thompson. If you have not already, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel. Really appreciate that. I'm trying to rest on my dollars a little bit during this video, so bear with me. Alright, so we are still on chapter 5 of Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare. And, not much has happened. A little bit of a recap is, crap, I'm trying to remember. Tessa is just, spent the night with, Will, and, she wakes up, and now she's in her own room. She had a little conversation with Jim. We learned that Jim's parents, were actually, traveling quite a while. If I'm right, Jim's mother is from Shanghai and his dad is British. So there's not much we know. Tessa has also found the Shadowhunter Codex, and she's also studying more about the Shadowhunter history. So with that in play, we are going to start a little bit into chapter 5. I did a little bit at the beginning, and we're gonna go. My plan for this book is to try and do a chapter a day, a chapter video a day. If you noticed, I've just downloaded YouTube Thumbnail, so I'm able to put covers on all of my videos. Shout out to YouTube and shout out to Thumbnail. I also want to give a big shout out to Cassandra Clare. I love your books. I'm so excited for Chain of Iron. I can't wait to pick it up this week. Hopefully I can. And yes, so we are on TID today. I really want to get through this book in, let's say, about 2. I'm not really sure. I mean, I want to try to get this done. It's March now, so maybe mid-April, going into May. I'm trying to finish up the TMI series, and hopefully by this summer, I'm reading Clockwork Prince and Clockwork Princess, and we can move on to the Dark Artifices series, hopefully this summer. And then Chain of Gold, and then Chain of Iron by the end of the year. That is the plan. So, we'll see how it goes. First of all, let's just go ahead and get into the book. I'm on page 100, which is a good start for me. I'm going to start just on the top. The music rose and rose to a crescendo, and Tessa woke, breathing hard, the book sliding off her lap as she sat up. The dream was gone, but the music remained high and haunting and sweet. She made her way to the door and peered out into the hallway. The music was louder in the corridor. In fact, it was coming from the room across the hall. The door was ajar slightly, and the notes seemed to pour through the opening like water through the narrow neck of a vase. A dressing gown hung on a hook by the door. Tessa drew it down and slipped it on over her night clothes. Stepping out into the hallway, as if in a dream, she crossed the corridor and put her hand gently to the door. It swung open under her touch. The room within the dark, lit only by the moonlight. She saw that it was not unlike her own bedroom across the hall. The same large 4-poster bed, the same dark, heavy furniture. The curtains had been pulled back from one tall window, and pale silver light poured into the room like a rain of needles. In the square patch of moonlight before the window, someone was standing. A boy. He seemed too slight to be a grown man, with a violin propped up against his shoulder. His cheeks rested against the instrument, and the bow sawed back and forth over the strings, ringing notes out of it, notes as fine and perfect as anything Tessa had ever heard. Her eyes were closed. "Will," he said, without opening his eyes or ceasing to play. "Will, is that you?" Tessa said nothing. She could not bear to speak, to interrupt the music, but in a moment the boy broke it off himself, lowering his bow and opening his eyes with a frown. "Will," he started, and then seeing Tessa, his lips parted in surprise. "You're not Will." He sounded curious, but not at all annoyed, despite the fact that Tessa had barged into his bedroom in the middle of the night and surprised him playing the violin in his nightclothes, or what Tessa assumed were his nightclothes. He wore a light, loose-fitting set of trousers and a collarless shirt with a black silk dressing gown tied loosely around them. She had been right. He was young, probably the same age as Will, and the impression of youth was heightened by its slightness. He was tall but very slender, and disappearing below the collar of his shirt, she could see the curling edges of the black design that she had earlier seen on Will's skin and on Charlotte's. She knew what they were called now, marks, and she knew what they made him, Nephilim, the descendants of Man and Angel. No wonder that in the moonlight, in his pale skin seemed to shine like Will's witchlight. His hair was pale silver as well as were his angular eyes. I'm so sorry, she said, clearing her throat. The noise sounded terribly harsh to her, and loud in the silence of the room. She wanted to cringe. I didn't mean to come in here like this. My room's across the hall, and that's all right. He lowered the violin from her shoulders. You're Miss Gray, aren't you? The shape-changing girl. Will told me a bit about you. Oh, Tessa said. Oh. The boy's eyebrows rose. You don't sound terribly pleased that I know who you are. It's that I think Will is angry with me, Tessa explained. So whatever he told you. He laughed. Will is angry with everyone, he said. I don't let it color my judgment. Moonlight spilled off the polished surface of the boy's violin as he turned to lay it down on top of the wardrobe. Hey, buddy. The bow beside it. When he turned back to her, he was smiling. I should have introduced myself earlier, she said. I'm James Carstairs. People call me Jim. Everyone does. Oh, you're Jim. You weren't at dinner, Tessa recalled. Charlotte said you were ill. Are you feeling better? He shrugged. I was tired, that's all. Well, I imagine it might be tiring doing what you all do. Having read the Codex, Tessa felt herself burning up with questions about Shadowhunters. Will said you came from a long way to live here. Were you in Idris? He raised his eyebrows. You know of Idris? Or did you come from another institute? They're all in the big cities, aren't they? And why to London? He interrupted her, bemused. You ask a lot of questions, don't you? My brother always says curiosity is my besetting sin. As sins go, it isn't the worst one. He sat down on the steamer trunk at the foot of the bed and regarded her with a curious gravity. So go ahead. Ask me whatever you want. I can't sleep anyway, and distractions are welcome. Immediately, Will's voice rose up in the back of Tessa's head. Jim's parents have been killed by demons, but I can't ask him about that. Tessa thought. Instead, she said, Will told me you came from far away. Where did you live before? Shanghai, Jim said. You know where that is? China, said Tessa with some indignation. Doesn't everyone know that? Jim grinned. You'd be surprised. What were you doing in China? Tessa asked with honest interest. She couldn't quite picture the place Jim was from. When she thought of China, all that came to mind was Marco Polo and tea. She had the sense that it was very, very far, as if Jim had come from the ends of the earth. East of the sun and west of the moon, Aunt Harriet would have said. I thought no one went there but missionaries and sailors. Shadowhunters live all over the world. My mother was Chinese, my father was British. They met in London and moved to Shanghai, where he offered the position of running the institute there. Tessa was startled. If Jim's mother had been Chinese, then so was he, wasn't he? She knew there were Chinese immigrants in New York. They mostly worked in laundries or sold hand-rolled cigars from the stands on the street. She had never seen one of them who looked anything like Jim with his odd silvery hair and eyes. Perhaps it had something to do with him being a shadow hunter. She couldn't think of a way to ask that. But she couldn't think of a way to ask that didn't seem horrendously rude. Fortunately, Jim didn't seem to be waiting for her to continue the conversation. I apologize for asking, but your parents are dead, aren't they? Did Will tell you that? He didn't need to. We orphans learn to recognize one another. If I might ask, were you very young when it happened? I was 3 when they died in a carriage accident. I hardly remember them at all. Only in tiny flashes, the scent of tobacco smoke or the pale lilac of my mother's dress. My aunt raised me and my brother Nathaniel. My aunt, though, at this, to her surprise, her throat began to tighten. A vivid picture of Aunt Harriet came to her mind, lying in the narrow brass bed in her bedroom, her eyes bright with fever, not recognizing Tessa at the end, calling her by her mother's name. Elizabeth Aunt Harriet had been the only mother Tessa had really ever known. Tessa had held her thin hand while she died, there in the room with the priest. She remembered thinking that now she truly was alone. She died recently. She took a fever unexpectedly. She never had been very strong. I'm sorry to hear that, Jim said, and he genuinely did sound sorry. It was terrible because my brother was always gone by then. He'd left for England a month before. He'd even sent us back presents, tea from Fortnum and Mason and chocolates. But then Aunt took sick and died, and I wrote to him over and over, but my letters came back. I was in despair. And then the ticket arrived. A ticket from a steamship to Southampton, and a note from Nate saying he'd meet at the docks, that I must come live with him in London now that Aunt was gone. Except now, I didn't think he ever wrote that note at all. Tessa broke off, her eyes stinging. I'm sorry, I'm monitoring you. You don't like to hear all this. What sort of man is your brother? What is he like? Tessa looked at Jim with a little surprise. The others had asked her what he might have done to get himself into his current situation if she knew where the Dark Sisters might be, keeping him, if he had the same power she did. But no one had ever asked what he was like. Aunt used to say he was a dreamer, she said. He always lived in his head. He never cared about how things were, only how they would be someday when he had everything he wanted. When he had everything we wanted, she corrected herself. He used to gamble. I think it's because he couldn't imagine losing. It wasn't part of his dream. Dreams can be dangerous things. No, no, she shook her head. I'm not saying you're right. He was a wonderful brother. Charlotte was right. It was easier to fight back tears if she found something, some object to fix her gaze on. She stared at Jim's hands. They were slender and long, and he had the same design on the back of his hand that Will did, the open eye. She pointed at it. What's that meant to do? Jim seemed not to notice she had changed the subject. It's a mark. You know what those are? He held his hand out to her, palm down. This one is the buoyance. It clears outside. Helps us to see downworld. He turned his hand over and drew up the sleeve of his shirt. All along the pale inside of his wrist and inner arms were more of the marks, very black against his white skin. They seemed to thread with the pattern of his vein, as if his blood ran through the marks too. For swiftness, night vision, angelic power to heal quickly, he read out loud. Though their names are more complex than that, and not in English. Do they hurt? They hurt when I received them. They didn't hurt at all now. He drew his sleeve down and smiled at her. Now don't tell me that's all the questions you have. Oh, I have more than you think. Why can't you sleep? She saw that she had caught him off guard. A look of hesitancy flashed across his face before he spoke. But why hesitate, she thought. He could always lie or simply defect, as Will would have. But Jim, he sensed instinctively, wouldn't lie. I had bad dreams. I was dreaming too, she said. I dreamed about your music. He grinned. A nightmare then? No, it was lovely. The loveliest thing I've ever heard since I came to this horrible city. London isn't horrible, Jim said equably. You simply have to get to know it. You must come with me out into London someday. I can show you the parts of it that are beautiful, that I love. Alright guys, that's all the time I have for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you do, make sure you subscribe and like for more Shadowhunter content. And again, that's been Clockwork Angel.